Day one of free agency is always the most fun and eventful day of free agency. In this video, I'm going to be going over some of the biggest and most impactful moves of free agency day one. Of course, I'm recording this at 7 p.m. on the dot, so any moves after that, I will not get into this video. However, we're going to start off with the most recent big news out of the day, which is going to be Brian Burns being traded to the Giants for a 2nd and 5th round pick. I'm pretty sure both this year, and signs a 5-year deal worth $150 million. Brian Burns, maybe not worth $150 million. That is 25, I think, a year. Brian Burns is one of the more productive pass rushing, especially pass rushing defensive linemen. Of course, the Panthers weren't going to sign him to a humongous deal either. However, he had 8 sacks in 2023, and I'm pretty sure he also was a Pro Bowler, if I'm not wrong. Also, 1 forced fumble and a fumble recovery. Overall, the Giants gave up a good amount for the Panthers, who got a semi-good deal with a 2nd round pick. I don't know which one it is. The Giants do have 2 2nd round picks. However, Giants get a big help on the edge, of course. And then the next humongous deal was Kirk Cousins signing a 4-year, $180 million deal for the Falcons, around $45 million a year. Kirk Cousins is 35 years old and coming off of an Achilles tear, but Kirk Cousins is a very consistent, accurate, and a productive quarterback through the air. For the Vikings the last 3 years, he's been a very solid quarterback. He's been top 10 in accuracy. I don't know if he was top 10 in passer rating in the last 2 years, but I'm pretty sure he might have been. And overall, this helps the Falcons offense a ton. They've been having quarterback problems. And moving on to Raheem Morris from the Rams, they clearly wanted to make the passing game really centered and structured within the pocket. So Kirk Cousins, I do agree with this move. I thought that Justin Fields was going to be one of the guys that they were going for, but instead they wanted to go with the more secure passing option with Kirk Cousins. $180 million for 4 years. Kirk Cousins will be 39 by the end of this contract. Really hope he holds up in that end of his department, but I do like this deal. I would rather them have gotten Kirk Cousins than probably Justin Fields. The next move we're going to be going to was humongous. Christian Wilkins, 4 years, $110 million with $84.75 million guaranteed. Humongous deal for the Raiders. This was my favorite move of free agency coming into this video. Probably, I love the fit. I think that Christian Wilkins is a really, really nice fit, especially at nose tackle, or if you want to move him to 3-4 defensive end, which I think that the Raiders are sticking at 3-4. You have Max Crosby, you have Tyree Wilson. You can fit that 3, and that is your front 3. I mean, that's really phenomenal. Christian Wilkins had 9 sacks last year and 1 forced fumble from the interior defensive line last year, and he was one of the best interior defensive linemen last year. And there are so many good interior defensive linemen, especially within the AFC, that he wasn't a Pro Bowler, but he definitely qualified to be one. $110 million with $84 million guaranteed is a lot. It looks like a lot, but in reality, defensive tackles are just becoming so much more important in the modern day NFL. Look at the deal that Chris Jones got. Look at the deal that Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons got last year. Christian Wilkins is just on their level as a top 10 interior defensive lineman, and I really, really, really like to fit next to Max Crosby because you're not going to be able to double team him, especially I think he plays on the left side primarily. And then another huge move coming from the Dolphins, or another player leaving the Dolphins. Panthers, 5 years, $100 million deal to Robert Hunt. $20 million per year for one of the better guards in the league. I think it is a bit of an overpay. However, I do not think it's a bad value addition for the Panthers, who had the worst qualified offensive line next to probably the Giants or the Jets in the league. But now Robert Hunt allowed 1 sack last year, had a 77.1 PFF grade. I really do like this move. I think I like the acquisition. Maybe a bit of an inflated price here, but the salary cap went up. So the guard market, especially, I'll get to the rest of the guards. There were a lot of guards that got a huge deal in this free agency. The guard market has just been going up and up in value. And then for the Panthers, you had Chandler Zavala, I think, at left guard. or no, Chandler Zavala might have been the right guard. He was the worst qualified player. I think he was the worst qualified player in the entire league last year. You move that to Robert Hunt. It's a good addition. I'm glad that they were able to go and get a really qualified player to solidify. Hopefully will increase that run blocking a ton. They were one of the worst run blocking teams in the league. So I'm happy they got him, but $100 million is a humongous deal for a guard. This is just one of the best deals in free agency, in my opinion. Bryce Huff on a 3-year deal, $51.1 million, going to the Eagles. Obviously, I wish the Jets, as a Jets fan, you can see the flag over there. I wish that they re-signed Bryce Huff because he's one of the most productive and efficient edge rushers in the league. He had a sub 50%. I think he only played 50% or less than 50% of the Jets' defensive line snaps. However, he was top 5 in the league in pass rush win rate, or top 10 in pass rush win rate. He had 10 sacks. He was one of the most productive edge rushers per snap basis, and was one of the top 10 in pass rushing productivity last year. The Eagles don't need that much help of the edge, but they are looking to trade guys like Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, who asked for a trade. So if you want to go get an edge rusher, I would think that Bryce Huff would probably be the best on the market. And they signed him to around, I think that's 18 a year. I think the first year is going to be $20 million. I think they front loaded it. However, really nice move for the Eagles, and I wish the Jets didn't lose him. And then this is the move that ruffled pretty much everybody's feathers. Obviously, Saquan Barkley is moving on to the Eagles. This is the first of 4 big running back contracts that were handed out this offseason. Saquon Barkley took a bit of a step back last year, 3.9 yards per carry. He did have 962 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. However, the Giants' offensive line was really, really rough last year, and especially in the run blocking department. But the Eagles, are signing him to a 3-year, $37.75 million contract. Finally, the Eagles are going to get a really, really good impact, star-worthy running back, and especially how good of a blocking offensive line they are, or the Eagles are. I think that this move is going to put Saquon Barkley back into the 1,000-yard mark. And then for the Giants, they're coming after Saquon. He didn't want to come back. And then for the Eagles, obviously, you don't want to pay running backs usually over $10 million, but if you want to really elevate your running game, you got to shell out that money. And then this was the most interesting running back move of the day, where it's the Packers signed Josh Jacobs to a undisclosed deal. I don't know exactly what the contract looks like or what the years even look like, but this came with a huge negative because the Packers ended up cutting Aaron Jones, and there is an argument to make that Aaron Jones is better than Josh Jacobs, and they actually lost in this acquisition. Josh Jacobs, 233 carries, 11th, but he had a 3.5 yards per carry. I know that the Raiders' offensive line wasn't really good, and he did lead the league with 1,700 rushing yards in 2022, but Aaron Jones had over 5 yards per carry. I know he was hurt for a bit of the season, but in the playoffs, Aaron Jones' impact was obviously there, great in the passing game. Josh Jacobs is a step below in almost both measures if we're talking, last year or the upcoming future. Also is the same age or a little older than Aaron Jones. A bit of a questionable move. Obviously, I can't comment on the contract or the yearage because I don't think it has been revealed even yet, but really weird move from the Packers. And then I think that this was another one of a really weird move for the Bears. DeAndre Swift is going on a 3-year, $24 million deal. DeAndre Swift was one of only 8 or 7 running backs to hit over 1,000 yards last year. He had 1,049 rushing yards, which was 5th in the league last year. And they signed him to a team-friendly deal. It is $7 million AAV, but DeAndre Swift really thrived in the Eagles system because, again, their offensive line is so good at blocking, and the zone gap schemes are really, really good. But DeAndre Swift lacks a bit of vision, and I think he got a bit worse in the receiving game last year than what he was with the Lions. And then for the Bears, it's a bit of an interesting move. Roschon Johnson they drafted last year. They have a bunch of running backs like Khalil Herbert on their roster. So I guess, a running back by committee with DeAndre Swift as the lead back. And then this was, I think, that easily the worst move currently of free agency, or one of the worst moves, is that the Titans signed Tony Pollard to an undisclosed deal. This means that they're 100% not bringing back Derrick Henry, which was, I think, known before the offseason. Obviously undisclosed contract, but I think it might have been around 6 to 7, something similar to what DeAndre Swift got. But the thing is, Tony Pollard doesn't really thrive at the goal line. He is more of an explosive change of pace back, and they really already had that with Tajee Spears, who was their explosive back and who was their receiving back. And you kind of just add a very, very similar back in Tony Pollard, who is not great between the tackles and who more needs a power guy to help with a change of pace. I don't exactly know what the Titans were maybe trying to do here, maybe trying to replace the productivity of Derrick Henry through the ground, but a bit of an interesting move for the Titans. The Raiders are also signing Gardner Minshew to a 2-year deal. This is one of the teams that in the beginning of the day at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they were like, oh, they're interested in Justin Fields. But now it's going to be a Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew was solid taking over for Anthony Richardson after he went out, had over 3,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, and was 13th in QBR. Gardner Minshew, I think, is a top 32 quarterback in the league, and for the Raiders, I think he is a solid scheme fit. I would be interested to see if they would want to go for Fields. Maybe they want to have a quarterback competition, but it is a 2-year deal, so I think that they're probably secure with taking Gardner Minshew. So I think it's a solid move for the Raiders. And this was last night. This was at 11:43 p.m. This report came out. So technically not today, but obviously Russell Wilson plans to sign with the Steelers on a 1-year, $1.2 million deal. That other $39 million that is being paid from him for the Broncos. Broncos are paying him a lot of money to not play for their team. People act like Russell Wilson committed war crimes and act like he wasn't top 10 in passing touchdowns. Had 26 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. But Russell Wilson is obviously declining. I think that Peyton Wilson decided to just sit him the last 3 games. You know, he wanted to get him out of town. And for the Steelers, it's not, I don't even think it's the best move for the Steelers or the best fit for Russell Wilson. I know that Arthur Smith and him had like a nice long talk or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I don't love Arthur Smith as a play caller at all. I think I liked him a lot more last year when I knew less about him as a person and, you know, his ego, whatever. Russell Wilson, George Pickens will have a great year, maybe Deontay Johnson, but Russell Wilson does not like to look off of his first receiver, and I pray for whoever their wide receiver 3 is, because he's not getting any targets this year. I don't know, the Steelers I don't think they moved the needle at all with this signing, really. But they only have a 1-year deal, and it's a very low commitment for their salary cap, so they can make some other moves. And now we're getting into the 3 big guard signings of the offseason, 1 center, but really the other interior offensive lineman moves. First, starting with Jonah Jackson, who was signed at 2 o'clock. This was one of the first ones that I saw, to a $51 million deal. Jonah Jackson was a really good guard for the Lions last year, which was probably arguably the best offensive line in football last year. PFF didn't like him a ton. They gave him a 60 PFF grade with 2 sacks allowed, but he played a ton of snaps, and the Lions were a really, really good overall blocking unit, especially as a run blocking team. But mainly for the Rams, they signed him because they need guard help a ton. And he will play at left guard. I'm assuming he'll play at left guard, which was one of the bigger holes. And for $51 million, it's not the worst deal either for one of the top guards in free agency. But then the other huge deal outside of Robert Hunt was Landon Dickerson for the interior offensive line. 4 years, $84 million. Well, I think that Landon Dickerson is really worth that deal. I think he is if you can see the contract, it's right here, $84 million. I don't know if he's a 2-time Pro Bowler, but I guarantee he has 1 Pro Bowl. And Landon Dickerson, Eagles offensive line, is one of the better offensive lines. And I think they're especially signing him to a huge contract because they lost Kelsey this offseason. And Landon Dickerson, if you guys don't remember, he was a center, an All-American center at Alabama. He can move to center, possibly, but he's thriving a ton at guard. And I think they're going to move Cam Jurgens to the center position. Cam Jurgens was Nebraska center that they drafted 2 years ago. But Landon Dickerson, humongous deal, but multi-time, or at least a minimum, a Pro Bowler, which is hard to come around for guards, and I think that's a good deal for him. And then the other interior offensive lineman guy that's moving interdivisionally is going to be Tyler Biadasz. Bit hard to pronounce the last name, but he is moving from the Cowboys to the Commanders. The Commanders obviously have Dan Quinn as their head coach, so Cowboys is going to Commanders, following the head coach here, or following the defensive coordinator, really. But he is getting 3 years, $30 million. Biadasz is one of the better centers in the league. He allowed something like he was top 5 in least pressures allowed per centers. Let me know if I'm wrong. But he also was one of the most efficient pass blocking centers in the league, and the Commanders were obviously one of the worst interior offensive lines in the league, especially at the center position. So this is a very solid move to solidify your weak spot, especially on the offensive line for the Commanders. This was the other humongous Giants deal that went through, or the other Giants player that left for a humongous deal, which was Xavier McKinney to a 4-year deal worth $68 million, $17 million a year. But Xavier McKinney has a ton of potential. He had 3 interceptions last year, one of the highest graded coverage safeties in the league last year, even with missing some time. But he had 116 total tackles too. He comes down a lot from the box and makes a lot of tackles. And obviously he has a ton of ball production with 3 interceptions, 11 pass deflections. $17 million a year is a ton for a safety though, especially if he's not in the top 10. But I would have Xavier McKinney in the bottom half of the top 10 probably, but $17 million a year is a huge contract. But Xavier McKinney I would have signed him for 12, 13. I would have tried to get that, would have been my mark. Arguably the better deal here for the Bengals. Going to sign Gino Stone for a 2-year, $15 million deal. I know that Gino Stone really is that 1-year wonder, because this year he absolutely went off with 7 interceptions, which was second in the NFL. But Gino Stone, I like him. Yeah, I thought he was really good for the not just as an interception guy, not just as a huge playmaker for the Ravens, but he held down the deep half a ton for the Ravens the majority of the year, and obviously the ball production is definitely there. And then for the Bengals, I thought they were missing safety a ton after losing Jesse Bates this offseason, so now they get a similar production at the safety position with Gino Stone. And then the last two I want to go over are the 2 linebacker deals, the 2 bigger linebacker deals. The first being Blake Cashman, who had his breakout year this year, to a 3-year, $25 million per year deal. I like this deal a ton. Moving from a D'Amico Ryan system to a Brian Flores system is a change, because one is going to be playing a ton of. Blake Cashman will be blitzing a ton. It's either he'll be blitzing a ton or he'll be he'll be covering pretty much every play. But D'Amico Ryan, heavy zone scheme. Moving on to the Vikings, but Blake Cashman this year had an 83.7 PFF grade. More importantly, an 84.7 run defense grade. Like the move for the Vikings, and then you also get a very quality linebacker at under $10 million per year. Good signing from the Vikings. And then the last, and one of my favorite signings, of course, of this offseason, I love Frankie Luvo, an ex-Jet player, moved on to the Panthers, had a huge year in 2022, and then this year had another solid year as well. 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He is one of the best blitzing linebackers, one of the best box linebackers, as well as a really good run defender and a phenomenal tackler. Had 125 tackles this year, and I mean, I think that people are going to act like Luvu isn't really worth this deal. He's proved his worth, I think, the last 3 years at the NFL level. In 3 years, $36 million deal. Dan Quinn is looking to solidify that Mike linebacker, or really that all-around linebacker, kind of that Micah Parsons was, which I think that Frankie Luvo can step in to. All right, but that's going to do it for this free agency day 1 recap. Let me know your thoughts on all these free agency moves. Let me know if your team made any moves, and then some moves that your team would or could make. Obviously, some other free agency moves haven't been made, like the Justin Fields trade and other moves to that sort. So I'll see you guys in the next video.